Why do so many great drivers fail in Ferrari? It goes without saying that Ferrari is the most successful and popular team in F1. It is the only team that has competed in every single F1 season so far, and that is something that truly brings the spotlight to the team. Many F1 fans started watching the sport thanks to Ferrari and the impact that this team had on the sport. The team itself has influenced a lot of young and prospective F1 drivers to become what they are today. However, the team has also seen a huge number of drivers failing and not being able to adapt to the conditions that they have provided for them. Let's go over them and see why the likes of Alonso, Vettel and Prost never made it big at Ferrari. These are the drivers that were actually killing it before they arrived at Ferrari. Alonso joined the team after he had already won 2 championships with Renault in 2005 and 2006, and although he was very close to winning a championship with Ferrari in 2010 and 2012, it was never bound to happen. For Vettel, who had already won 4 consecutive championships with Red Bull prior to joining Ferrari, the turbo hybrid era dominated by Mercedes was simply too much for the Maranello team or any other team on the grid to handle. As for Prost, he won 3 championships before joining Ferrari, and he went on to win another one in 1993 after leaving the Italian team. So with all of this talent, there has to be something wrong with the team, right? Let's start with Prost, because after all, he is the oldest driver here and the first one that experienced the troubles that we elaborated on earlier in this video with Ferrari. The Prost-Ferrari relationship was one of the most complex ones out there because Ferrari was still running on the old-fashioned way back in the 90s. That way, Prost was more or less doomed to failure, and although he was part of Ferrari for just 2 seasons, the complexity of their relationship was something that was truly out of proportions. 1990 wasn't a bad season for Prost and Ferrari as they narrowly missed out on the championship, losing it to Senna. However, Prost did have some bad blood with Mansell at that time, which ultimately led to a lack of communication between the drivers and the team members themselves. Just 1 year after the 1990 season, Prost was fired from Ferrari before the last race of the season. One of the main reasons why Prost left Ferrari, or more precisely was fired from the Maranello team, is that there wasn't anyone back then that could have handled the personalities of Mansell and Prost at the same time. It's like handling Hamilton and Vettel in the same team, and you know what happens when 2 alpha males collide in the same team. Leadership was lacking heavily back then, much more compared to what's going on in Ferrari now, and that was the main reason why Prost had to seek other opportunities in F1. Just 2 years after his departure from Ferrari, Prost won the 1993 championship with Williams, which turned out to be his last one. This just goes to show that the personality of Prost was something that Ferrari wasn't able to handle by themselves, and the fact that Prost won a championship right after jumping away from the Maranello team speaks volumes for how Ferrari was led back at that time. Another huge factor that contributed to Ferrari's lack of success is the way that they expressed everything to the media. Prost admitted later on in his life that he expressed the team's problems in public way too often, and that ultimately led to a lack of confidence and even further problems. So all in all, Prost was in the wrong place at the wrong time, as Ferrari wasn't able to handle 2 great drivers at that time. Let's go with Fernando Alonso and why he wasn't able to win a championship with the Italian team after already having 2 behind his name prior to joining one of the most successful teams on the grid. Right from the start, we'll tell you that Alonso's expectations of the Italian team were just way too high. You could even say through the roof. Right from the start of their collaboration, controversies were included. Alonso was brought in as a replacement for Raikkonen, who not only had a contract for the 2010 season, but was also the last driver that won Ferrari the Drivers' Championship. To this day, Raikkonen is still the last driver to win a championship for Ferrari, which only goes to say that the issues with Ferrari go much deeper than we can possibly elaborate. Under Domenicali's leadership, Alonso was much closer to the championship for Ferrari than any other driver for the Maranello team. He scored 11 wins, 4 pole positions, and 44 podium finishes for Ferrari, coming very close to winning the championship in 2010 and 2012. What more could you say about about Fernando Alonso. If you look at the impact he's had on Alpine in 2022, you can understand how much he influences the team by always extracting 120% from the car he's driving. The Ferrari years were no exception, as he made everyone more motivated than ever to bring back yet another championship in the basket. However, he had to face Sebastian Vettel, who is a generational talent and is a driver that has won 4 straight Drivers' Championships. The aerodynamic era was purely dominated by Red Bull, and although Ferrari did come close on a couple of occasions, as we mentioned earlier, in 2010 and 2012, the mechanical failures and simply luck weren't on their side of things. Well, we all know that Alonso is a guy that barely holds back his frustration when things don't go his way, and that was the case in the Ferrari. This was one of the reasons why Ferrari struggled to keep a positive record, even though things weren't as good as they were supposed to be on the track. So, having a driver like Alonso can surely be considered as a double-edged sword. When he performs, but when the team is failing him or when the car is not giving him what he wants, rest assured that there are going to be public bashes about it, and he isn't holding anything back. When it comes to Ferrari, you can easily say that they haven't really provided Alonso with the best of the cars out there, and you can easily say that Ferrari was the 3rd fastest car at that point. Even with this in mind, Fernando almost won the championship on 2 occasions, in 2010 and 2012, and that is something that no one should take away from him. Let's get into Vettel's profile as the last driver that had huge aspirations prior to joining Ferrari, but they dipped quickly after he made his debut in 2015. Vettel won 4 straight championships with Red Bull prior to joining Ferrari, and they turned out to be the last ones that he'd ever win in his career. After having 4 straight dominant seasons, Vettel decided to join Ferrari and to see whether the Maranello team would be able to push him further and whether he could continue his success. Sebastian stayed with Ferrari until the end of the 2020 season, having won 14 races, 12 pole positions, and 55 podiums for the Maranello team. Still, it was far away from enough when it comes to championship-winning seasons. For starters, we need to say that every team out there had to fight the dominance of the turbo hybrid era that Mercedes established from 2014 until 2021. They won 8 straight Constructors' Championships and only lost the Drivers' Championship to Verstappen in 2021, which speaks enough for itself. However, Ferrari did struggle a lot when it came to the reliability of its engine. We remember the 2017 Malaysia race, which was ultimately the decisive one when it comes to Vettel's championship aspirations, and we surely remember the 2018 Hockenheim crash for Vettel that turned out to be the soul crusher for the German driver. In Vettel's case, you could say that he had to fight talents like Verstappen and Hamilton while he was in Ferrari, which was much more than the Maranello team could handle at that point on. On top of that, the team was found guilty of cheating in 2019, and the 2020 season was a disastrous one for them, as they and the affiliated teams were forced to run on much less fuel than the other competitors. Overall, you could argue that Vettel's tenure at Ferrari was more about mechanical issues than team issues, but we do remember that Vettel had to devise his own strategy in the middle of a race because he wasn't entirely trusting of his team's tacticians. 2020 was the final nail in the coffin in which Vettel couldn't endure the pressure and the awfully performing car of Ferrari, which is why he left for Aston Martin. Ferrari are still to prove themselves as a championship-winning team, which isn't something that they are doing well in 2022, even though they started the season on a perfect note. With that being said, what do you think of these 3 Ferrari failures? Do you think that the team could have done a much better job of managing these drivers? Let us know in the comments below.